Look at the little plastic box in your hands. You just spent $30 at the garden center on a home soil testing kit. It has beautiful little colored capsules and plastic test tubes. You brought it home to your city backyard, mixed a little dirt with water, and the liquid turned blue or pink. You looked at the chart. It told you your nitrogen is low and your pH is perfect. You smiled, curious. You think your soil is ready and your family is safe. But you are looking at an illusion. That expensive piece of plastic only tells you how to feed your tomatoes. It tells you absolutely nothing about what is actually hiding inside that urban dirt. Serious. It does not show you the invisible legacy of the city. You work hard. You want to grow clean, healthy food for your children right in your backyard or in a community garden. That is a wonderful, noble goal. But urban gardening is not the same as planting a field in the pristine taiga of Siberia. Thoughtful. In the city, the soil remembers everything. If you live in a house built before 1978, the old paint on your exterior walls contained heavy metals. For decades, that paint chipped, peeled, and washed off in the rain, settling directly into the ground right next to your foundation. For decades, millions of cars drove down your street, burning leaded gasoline. The exhaust fumes drifted into the air and settled quietly onto your front lawn and your backyard. This is not your fault. It is simply the industrial history of the modern city. Mother Earth absorbed it all because that is what she does. But those heavy metals, especially lead, do not just evaporate. They sit in the top 6 inches of your topsoil, exactly where you want to plant your delicate organic lettuce. The garden centers usually do not talk about this. They want to sell you organic fertilizer and beautiful raised beds. They assume your soil is a blank canvas. But true science requires us to look at the reality of the ground beneath our boots. The environmental agencies recently updated their guidelines, lowering the acceptable threshold for lead in residential soil. I see people reading these reports and panicking. They look at their vegetable patches and think the earth is toxic. Panic is the enemy of a good harvest. Do not panic, and do not let fear stop you from growing your own food. We simply need to use true, rigorous science. We need to test the earth properly, understand how plants actually interact with heavy metals, and build biological shields. Today, I will teach you the absolute rules of urban soil safety. I will show you how to properly map your yard, where the real danger zones are, and how to build a raised bed that physically severs the connection to contaminated ground using nothing but thick cardboard and organic debris. And at the very end of this instruction, I will share an old, simple method for washing your harvest. It uses 1 drop of a basic kitchen ingredient to remove microscopic urban dust from your lettuce leaves, a method far superior to those expensive chemical produce washes they sell in the grocery store. But first, we must put away the plastic testing kit and learn how to sample the earth like a real agronomist. If you want to know what is in your soil, you do not test the middle of the lawn and assume the whole yard is the same. In the agricultural institutes where I trained, we mapped the land. We knew that contamination is never even. In a city lot, the highest concentration of lead is almost always located in a very specific area. We call it the drip line. This is the zone exactly 3 feet out from the foundation of your house, where the rain washes off the roof and the old siding. This is the danger zone. You never plant root vegetables in the drip line. To take a proper sample, you need a clean stainless steel trowel and a clean plastic bucket. Do not use old rusty tools, and do not use a galvanized metal bucket. Galvanized metal contains zinc, and it will contaminate your sample, giving you a false reading at the laboratory. You are going to divide your yard into zones. The future garden bed in the open grass is Zone 1. The drip line near the house is Zone 2. You must keep the soil from these zones completely separate. Walk in a zigzag pattern across Zone 1. Every few steps, dig a small hole exactly 6 inches deep. Take a thin slice of earth from the side of that hole, from the surface all the way down to the 6-inch mark. Put it in the bucket. Do this 5 to 10 times across the zone. Mix that dirt thoroughly with your hands. That is your representative sample. Let it dry naturally on some clean newspaper indoors. Do not bake it in the oven or you will ruin the organic matter. Now do not take this to the hardware store. Put 2 cups of this mixed dry soil into a clean plastic bag and send it to your local university agricultural extension laboratory. For $15 or $20, almost the same price as the plastic toy, they will run a complete professional heavy metal screening using mass spectrometry. They will give you the exact parts per million of lead in your soil. This is not marketing, this is pure chemistry. You will have the absolute truth in your hands. When you receive that piece of paper from the laboratory, you must know how to read it. If the number is low, you celebrate. But if the number shows moderate urban contamination, you do not give up. You do not hire a bulldozer to remove your topsoil. Mother Earth has provided mechanisms to lock these metals away, and plants have natural biological filters that protect their fruits. In the next step, I will show you exactly how to read those laboratory numbers without fear. I will reveal a simple, inexpensive soil amendment that physically alters the chemical structure of lead, locking it into a crystal so it can never enter your vegetables. And I will teach you the strict biological rule of the fruit. When the envelope finally arrives from the University Extension Laboratory, you open it carefully. You unfold the paper and look past the nitrogen and potassium levels. Your eyes go straight to the heavy metals section, specifically the line marked lead, measured in parts per million, or ppm. For many urban gardeners, this single moment is filled with a deep, quiet anxiety. The environmental protection agencies frequently update their guidelines, and they will tell you that natural background levels in undisturbed rural soils are usually very low. But you are holding a paper that says your city backyard has 200 or perhaps 300 parts per million. Your heart sinks. You look out your window at the patch of earth where you wanted to grow healthy food for your children, and suddenly you feel that the ground itself is broken and dangerous. If you search the internet for advice, the glossy magazines and the landscaping blogs will immediately tell you to panic. They will tell you that your soil is toxic waste. They advise you to hire a professional contractor with a bulldozer, excavate the entire top 12 inches of your property, pay a fortune to haul it away to a landfill, and bring in hundreds of plastic bags of sterile, expensive commercial earth. They sell you extreme fear because extreme fear is a very profitable industry. Please take a deep breath. Do not let panic dictate your actions. In the harsh agricultural environments where I learned my trade, abandoning the land was simply never an option. We had to work with exactly what Mother Earth provided, and to do that, we had to understand the deep structural biology and chemistry of the soil. You must understand that simply possessing heavy metals in your urban dirt does not automatically mean those metals are entering your food. There is a massive fundamental difference between total lead in the soil and bioavailable lead. This is the crucial scientific distinction that the panic-driven articles always fail to explain to you. Bioavailable means the element is actually dissolved in the soil moisture, allowing the microscopic root hairs of a plant to pull it upward into its vascular system. The incredible reality of nature is that most lead in urban soil is inherently lazy. It bonds tightly to organic matter and heavy clay particles. It does not want to move. If your laboratory test shows a moderate level of contamination, say between 200 and 400 parts per million, you do not need a bulldozer. You need a simple, inexpensive chemical reaction. You need to create what I call the Phosphorus Lock. This is not a new invention. This is fundamental traditional agronomy. Lead is highly chemically reactive with phosphorus. When you introduce a strong natural source of phosphorus into contaminated topsoil, the two elements actively seek each other out. They bind together to form an entirely new, incredibly stable mineral called pyromorphite. Pyromorphite is basically a microscopic crystal. It is practically insoluble in water. Once this mineral crystal is formed in your garden bed, the lead is permanently locked away in a vault. The plant roots cannot break it down or absorb it. It becomes physically and biologically inert. To create this lock in your backyard, you do not need to purchase complex, expensive synthetic remediation chemicals. You simply go to your local agricultural supply store and purchase a heavy bag of basic bone meal or rock phosphate. This is one of the oldest, cheapest organic soil amendments in the world. In the early spring, you work a generous layer of this bone meal deep into the top 6 inches of your soil. However, there is one strict rule for the Phosphorus Lock to function correctly. You must strictly control your soil pH. You must ensure your garden soil is never highly acidic. Acidic soil, a pH below 6.5, slowly dissolves heavy metals, making them mobile and dangerous again. If your lab test shows your soil is acidic, you simply add agricultural lime or natural wood ash from your fireplace to raise the pH closer to neutral, right around 7.0. The combination of high phosphorus and neutral pH creates a massive biological shield within the earth itself. You are using simple, elegant chemistry to protect your family. But manipulating the soil chemistry is only the first line of defense. The second line of defense relies on the incredible biological intelligence of the plants themselves. When urban gardeners see moderate lead levels, they often abandon the dream of fresh, organic tomatoes completely. This is a tragedy born of misunderstanding. I call this the rule of the fruit. You must remember this biological rule for the rest of your gardening life. Heavy metals behave very predictably when they enter a plant's root system. Even if a microscopic amount of lead bypasses your phosphorus lock and enters the fine root hairs, the plant's internal biology acts as a massive physical filter. Heavy metals are dense and difficult for the plant to transport. Therefore, the vast majority of any contamination gets trapped entirely within the root tissue itself. A very small percentage might travel slightly up the main woody stem, but almost none of it, statistically close to absolute zero, ever crosses the biological barrier into the reproductive organs of the plant, which is the fruiting body. The plant knows exactly how to protect its seeds. Mother Nature designed this filtration system perfectly. Therefore, if you have moderate lead levels in your urban soil and you have actively applied your phosphorus lock, you can still safely and confidently grow anything that produces a fruit high above the ground. You can plant massive, heavy vines of heirloom tomatoes. You can grow sweet bell peppers, jalapenos, eggplants, cucumbers, zucchini, and tall stalks of corn. The flesh of these vegetables will be perfectly clean, safe, and rich in the natural vitamins your family needs. The roots act as the biological filter, and you do not eat tomato roots. However, the rule of the fruit also dictates absolute caution with other specific crops. If you know your city soil has an elevated history of lead, you never, under any circumstances, plant root crops directly in that earth. Carrots, radishes, beets, turnips, and potatoes grow their edible parts directly inside the contaminated zone. Their skin makes direct, prolonged contact with the heavy metal particles. Even if the internal flesh is clean, the microscopic dust firmly embedded in the skin of a city carrot is highly dangerous, especially for young children whose bodies absorb heavy metals much more rapidly than adults. You also do not plant leafy greens like lettuce, spinach, or Swiss chard directly in questionable soil. While they do not absorb much lead internally, the toxic dust from the bare ground splashes heavily up onto the wide leaves every time it rains. For those high-risk crops, we must change our strategy completely. We must build a fortress above the ground. In the next instruction, I will show you how to construct the ultimate impenetrable raised bed for your root vegetables and your delicate greens. I will show you how to physically sever the connection to the urban dirt below, not by spending hundreds of dollars on fancy cedar planks and bagged commercial potting soil, but by using the ancient method of Hügelkultur combined with a heavy cardboard shield. We will use the free resources of the city to build pure living topsoil from scratch. You understand the phosphorus lock and the biological rule of the fruit. Your tall tomatoes and heavy peppers are safe above the earth. But what if you want to pull a fresh carrot from the ground? What about delicate spring radishes or crisp lettuce? If your laboratory tests showed elevated heavy metals, You simply cannot plant these crops directly into the contaminated urban earth. The risk of toxic dust clinging to the skin of a root vegetable or splashing onto a low leaf is too high. You must build an isolated environment. If you search the internet, you will find a beautiful, dangerous fairy tale called phytoextraction. The glossy blogs tell you to plant a dense field of giant yellow sunflowers across your backyard. They claim the deep roots act like biological vacuums, sucking the heavy metals out of the dirt and storing the lead inside their thick stalks. They promise that after one summer, your soil will be pure. This is a profound misunderstanding of true science. In professional environmental remediation, scientists use highly toxic synthetic chelating chemicals to force the lead to dissolve so the plants can drink it. You do not have these chemicals, and you should never use them in a home garden. Without them, a sunflower is incredibly inefficient at moving lead. It pulls up a microscopic fraction while the vast majority of the contamination remains firmly locked in the heavy clay. But here is the true danger. Suppose your sunflowers do manage to pull up a small amount of lead throughout the long summer. In the autumn, the urban gardener, believing they have done a wonderful thing for the earth, chops down those tall stalks and throws the entire plant directly into their backyard compost bin. Think about the biological disaster that just occurred. You took the heavy metals that were safely buried deep in the soil, concentrated them inside the plant tissue, and then manually rotted them down into a rich humus. The following spring, you take that homemade compost and spread it directly over your vegetable beds. You just move the invisible danger from the deep soil directly onto the surface, right where your new seeds will sprout. If you use plants to extract heavy metals, those plants become hazardous waste. They must be thrown in the city garbage, never returned to the food cycle. Do not plant sunflowers to clean your soil. Plant them only to feed the wild birds, so you must build a raised bed. The magazines tell you to go to the hardware store, spend $300 on thick cedar planks, and buy 30 plastic bags of sterilized commercial soil. But if you place a wooden box filled with light, porous potting soil directly on top of heavy contaminated urban dirt, you are completely ignoring the fundamental physics of water. You trigger a powerful physical phenomenon known as capillary action, or wicking. Think of a dry kitchen sponge sitting on a wet countertop. When heavy summer thunderstorms saturate the contaminated native soil beneath your expensive raised bed, that toxic lead-laced water will physically wick upward, fighting gravity, directly into the clean, imported soil you just purchased. The microscopic lead particles travel with the water column, slowly infiltrating the root zone of your new carrots. You built a bridge for the exact elements you were trying to avoid. In the traditional agronomy of the cold climates where I trained, we built highly productive, isolated beds without spending a single dollar on imported soil or plastic liners. We used a heavy physical interruption layer combined with the ancient principles of Hügelkultur. First, you build the shield. Do not dig into the contaminated urban dirt. Disturbing that soil only releases toxic dust into the air you breathe. Leave the grass exactly as it is. Collect thick, heavy-duty corrugated cardboard from large delivery boxes. Remove all plastic packing tape and metal staples. Lay this thick cardboard directly over the contaminated earth exactly where you want your new bed. You must overlap the edges of the cardboard heavily by at least 6 to 8 inches. Leave absolutely no gaps. This dense layer of cellulose physically blocks the capillary action of the water below. It completely severs the connection between the toxic urban history and your fresh roots. Now you fill the bed. Do not buy 30 bags of peat moss. Use the forgotten resources of the city. Collect thick, fallen hardwood branches and old, untreated logs. Lay these heavy pieces of wood directly on top of your cardboard shield. Pack them tightly. Cover the logs entirely with autumn leaves, grass clippings, and clean kitchen compost. Finally, cap this entire mound with 8 to 10 inches of clean, tested topsoil or municipal compost from a safe source. This massive structure of wood and leaves acts as a giant internal sponge, Over the next several years, the wood slowly decays. It absorbs incredible amounts of clean rainwater from above, holding it deep within the bed for the dry weeks of August and completely stopping the capillary draw from the soil below. Most importantly, the deep roots of your carrots and beets will hit the decaying wood and stop. They will never penetrate the thick cardboard shield. They will never reach the contaminated city dirt. You have broken the capillary bridge and you have protected your harvest using nothing but true science, basic physics, and the discarded materials of the modern city. You have built the cardboard shield. You have locked the heavy metals deep in the earth with the phosphorus reaction. You understand the biological rule of the fruit, and your root vegetables are safely isolated above the city dirt. You look at your garden and believe the hard work is finished. But true science requires absolute vigilance until the harvest is actually inside your kitchen. The greatest invisible threat in an urban garden is not the root system of a mature tomato plant. The absolute greatest danger is microscopic toxic dust. In the agricultural environments where I trained, we deeply understood the physics of weather. When a heavy summer rainstorm rolls across the city, large drops of water plummet from the sky. When they strike bare, exposed city earth, they act like tiny, violent explosions. The kinetic impact shatters the dry soil surface, launching microscopic particles of dirt, old paint dust, and heavy clay several feet into the air. This physical phenomenon is called soil splash. This contaminated mud lands directly on the wide lower leaves of your lettuce, your spinach, and your Swiss chard. It cakes onto the skin of your low-hanging cucumbers. As the sun comes out and dries the moisture, it turns back into an invisible, highly persistent powder firmly adhered to your food. The modern gardening industry will offer you expensive produce washes in plastic bottles to clean this off later. But true agronomy focuses entirely on prevention. You do not solve the problem of soil splash by scrubbing the vegetables harder in the kitchen. You solve it by completely eliminating the bare earth in the garden. The ground in a city must never, under any circumstances, be naked. To stop the explosions of rain, you must build armor for the soil. This armor is a thick, continuous layer of organic mulch. You do not need to buy expensive bags of dyed wood chips. Look at the resources the city provides for free. Gather clean, untreated straw, completely dried grass clippings from a lawn that has not been treated with synthetic herbicides, or a massive pile of shredded autumn leaves. Lay this mulch 3 to 4 inches thick across every single square inch of exposed soil in your garden beds. Push it right up to the base of your plants, but leave a tiny fraction of space so the stems can breathe. When the heavy rains come now, the drops hit the soft, porous surface of the mulch. The kinetic energy of the impact is completely absorbed by the dry leaves. The water trickles gently down into the root zone. The urban dirt remains entirely undisturbed below. The soil splash is completely eliminated, and your low-growing greens remain physically clean. Furthermore, this thick blanket stabilizes the soil moisture perfectly, preventing the extreme wet and dry cycles that cause your tomatoes to rot. But the armor on the soil is only the beginning of true urban garden hygiene. The most common vector for heavy metals entering your home is not the vegetables. It is you. It is your hands, your clothes, and your boots. In the city, you must adopt the strict hygiene protocols of an industrial agronomist. First, establish a rigid, uncompromising rule for your footwear. The boots you wear to dig in the city dirt must never cross the threshold of your home. You do not walk into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. You do not step onto the carpet. You create a dedicated clean zone at your back door. You remove the boots outside every single time. Microscopic lead dust tracked into the house on the soles of your shoes settles into the fibers of your rugs, where it becomes a permanent hazard for young children crawling on the floor. Keep the city outside the house. Second, consider how you wash your hands after a long day of planting. The immediate instinct for most people is to walk to the sink, turn the handle all the way to the hot side, and scrub with warm water and soft soap. This is a profound biological mistake when dealing with urban dust. The human skin is porous. When you expose your hands to warm or hot water, the microscopic pores in your skin naturally expand and open wide. This physical expansion allows the microscopic particles of heavy metals, which are trapped in the oils of your hands, to penetrate deeper into the dermal layers before the soap can wash them away. When you finish working in the urban soil, you must always wash your hands and your forearms with cold water first. Ice cold water forces the pores of your skin to immediately constrict and close tight. It acts as a temporary physical shield. Use a stiff brush and plain, heavy-duty soap under running cold water to physically scrub the dirt off the surface of your skin. Only after you have thoroughly removed all the earth with cold water should you switch to warm water to finish cleaning. This is a strict rule, but it is absolute true science. Finally, we must address the harvest itself. You have brought a basket of beautiful, ripe vegetables into your kitchen. Even with a thick layer of mulch, the ambient dust of the city, exhaust fumes, microscopic tire rubber, and fine soil particles blown by the wind has settled onto the skin of your food. Do not trust a simple rinse under the tap, and do not spend money on commercial vegetable wash. You need a biological bath. Fill a large clean basin or your kitchen sink with cold water. Add exactly 1 cup of plain cheap white vinegar to the water. The acetic acid in basic white vinegar is exactly what we need. Submerge your entire harvest. The tomatoes, the thick bunches of kale, the cucumbers, completely under the water. Let them soak completely undisturbed for exactly 10 minutes. The mild acidity of the vinegar breaks down the microscopic waxy layer that urban dust clings to. It dissolves the bond between the pollution and the skin of the fruit. After 10 minutes, gently agitate the vegetables with your hands in the water. Now, pay close attention. Do not pull the plug and let the dirty water drain through the food. Lift the clean vegetables out of the dirty water and place them in a colander. Finally, rinse them thoroughly with fresh, cold, running water. Look at the water remaining in the basin. It will be cloudy. It will have a fine layer of grit at the bottom. That is the invisible reality of the city. That is the dust you just successfully removed from your family's dinner table. You do not need to fear the earth. You need to understand the physical reality of heavy metals, the biological intelligence of plants, and the strict mechanics of physical hygiene. Lock the soil, shield the ground, isolate the roots, and wash with cold water. You have the tools and you have the true science. The rest is simply discipline. Work with your hands.